turn it back over to Craig. He's going to share from Indigenous Ministries. How many of you were blown away with just a couple of the stories he told you? So buckle up, get ready, and Craig, I turn it back to you, my friend.
Yeah, this is the hard part. I've never been good with time limits, but this is going to kill me. First off, let me go back. I am with Indigenous Ministries. You're familiar with this because you've had John and Dee Cook here. You guys help support their ministry. John and Dee started this ministry in 2005, and they have been engaged in it faithfully ever since. And John and Dee have been dear friends of ours. And Kathy and I, my wife and I, joined them in January of this year after 40 years in pastoral ministry. And I started when I was 4. And so we have always loved missions. When we got married, we thought we'd go into missions, and God had a different path for us, and it was pastoral ministry. And out of that pastoral ministry, in San Bernardino, California, in Santa Clarita, California, and then in Cedarville, Ohio, we have seen dozens of missionaries go out from our churches. Well, after pastoral ministry drew to a close in Ohio, we were trying to figure out what would be next. John and Dee called and asked if we would consider joining them, and as we prayed, God opened that door, and it's just kind of an amazing thing. My title is Director of Educational Development. That's fancy, but it simply means I assist John in whatever way I can. I develop training curriculum. I work hard to plan conferences like the ones we do in Egypt and also we do in India, and we'll probably start doing in Iraq, but we do pastors' conferences where we help feed them and encourage them, and then I'm to expand our formal training. I'll tell you about that in just a little bit. Some amazing things going on in India and opportunities that exist there. Our strategy is leadership training. We're not there to do all the work. We are finding that God is at work in different places, but there are leaders who are emerging who need training. They just need Bible training. And if there's one thing we are loaded for bear here in the United States with, it's Bible training. And so we give that to them. Church multiplication through gospel-driven child sponsorship. We don't just do child sponsorship to feed the hungry, although that's important. But in the countries we do it, we use child sponsorship for people here to sponsor a child which feeds a family for a month, but we do that under the auspices of local workers, including a pastor that we put in place who calls on those families every week and prays with them and talks with them and delivers their supplies every month and brings them to church if they're willing to come. And we've seen over and over again people trusting Christ through showing the love of Christ through a local. And through that's just been an amazing thing to see happen. We work in Iraq, we work in Egypt, we work in India, and we work in the Philippines. And all of these places where there are local workers that are working. Let me just tell you about, I spent a month in Iraq and Egypt. Let me tell you about our ministry in Iraq. Broke down around two things. That's our office in Erbil. It's where John has his headquarters. We offer training as well. The picture there is of Good Shepherd Baptist Church in Erbil, a church we helped get started, made up almost solely of refugees. Refugees from other places in Iraq, refugees from Syria, refugees from other places where lost their homes 5 or 6 years ago to ISIS. And if they're from Syria, they've lost it because of the civil war that's been ongoing, and they've fled, and they're living in the Kurdish region in the north of Iraq, the Kurdish province, where they have freedom of religion. The Kurds love Americans, and they want a secular society in the sense of all religions being honored, and so this is a place where they can find freedom, and they've been in refugee camps being taken care of, but it's not as doing there. This is my first day in Iraq. We were in Karakosh, a city that ISIS decimated and now has a Christian population returning, and I say Christian, historically Christian. Just like there are countries in Europe that are historically Christian, people would say they're Christians. There is actually in Iraq, there have been Christians in Iraq since the 2nd century. There have been Christians in Iraq. In fact, the Apostle Thomas brought the gospel to Mesopotamia on his way to India. And so you have this amazing record of gospel history, but many of these churches in Iraq, they don't have gospel. And so over half the people we're seeing come to Christ come out of that movement. In Karakosh, these kids were receiving their backpacks. They're part of our sponsorship program. Once a year, we provide backpacks with school supplies. We provide uniforms or the clothes they need to go to school, because while there's public education, it's not free. And so we take care of that for them. In the middle picture there are our 4 workers who were there. On the far left is Fadi, the guy who's led 11 people to Christ. Right next to him is a guy whose name is now Daniel. It used to be Ali, but he changed it because he wanted to be Christian. He's a former Muslim. At that point, a former Muslim, 2.5 weeks. Okay? Who's there helping us. He's one of the 11 that were led to Christ. Tower is his brother-in-law, and Marvin on the far right, ministry in Karakosh. It's just amazing, and I'm not going to take this much time on slides, or we'll be here till 2. And I left out a bunch of pictures. Now, I now understand why when I was growing up, missionaries brought you 150 slides you had to sit through. You sat there going, what in the world? And they're looking at every one of them and saying, my heart is breaking for that person, or my heart is just so rejoicing for that person. So I'll try to be much quicker, okay? But it is amazing what God is doing and how we got to help these children and families that are coming back to there. I got to meet one special kid. His name is Anais. Anais Amar Aliyah from Syria. My wife and I have sponsored him through I.M.I for 4 years. And I got to meet him. And I got to be in his house. And I got to be with his family. And I got to see what God has done in one child's life. After this, we went to the house of the child that John and Dee have sponsored. Anais is from a Christian background. John and Dee's girl is from a Muslim background. And we had the chance to pray with these families and talk with them about Jesus. It was just incredibly precious. Our big task while we were in Iraq was to do leadership training for our churches. We have churches in Baghdad, we have church in Erbil, and we have a church in a town called Zaho. And these churches are reaching all sorts of people, but they're now ready to multiply, and they don't have leaders. And the only model of leadership Iraq has seen that has been successful is that of Saddam Hussein, and that was not necessarily the best of leadership models. Well, we don't want our churches to be dictatorships. We want them to know how to develop leaders. And so this training was on the principle of multiplied leadership, the principle of elders, the principle of deacons. And so we had people from all 4 of our churches and some others who heard about the training come to hear this training. One of our fellow teachers was from Jordan, and he's actually in Erbil for a while, and he's helping. That picture right there, you see John, you see me, those 2 boys right there, men really. On the far right, Dr. Bedder, and then his brother. Dr. Bedder is a Muslim. He's the son of our banker. But our banker is really frustrated with Islam, and she knew John was a Christian, and my son is really searching. Would you talk to him? So he talked to him, and he said to Bedder, would you like to come to church with me? He said, yeah. He showed up at church. Afterwards, he said, would it be okay for me to come again? He says, because I've given up on the mosque. All they do is yell at you. He says, I feel life here. We said, sure. He called the next week. He says, I'm going to come again. Can I bring my brother? Pray for those 2 young men. They are this close to trusting Christ. I mean, this is my first trip. I'm going, is it always this exciting? This is incredible to see these kinds of things happen. But I have to tell you these stories too, because I told you about Daniel. He and his brother became Christians. And then there with me on the left is Salim. Salim is a Syrian refugee. In other pictures, you could see he's a bodybuilder. He is big and buff and all of that. But he grew up in the traditional Christianity, but he met Fadi. That's Fadi and his wife, Mariana. Mariana runs our child sponsorship program in Erbil. And they met each other at the gym, and Fadi started talking to him about Jesus, and he realized there was something he didn't have. And he says, so he just starts following Fadi around, and Fadi told me he's going to our leadership training for the churches. He said, well, can I come? I said, sure, and he comes, and we're talking in those meetings about baptism and the importance of baptism and getting people to be baptized, not just as children, but we want to be baptized as a testimony of real faith. And somehow that broke through to Salim's heart, and he said, I don't have real faith. How do I get that? So he asked to meet with us afterwards, and he trusted Christ that day. I mean, this is just Iraq. And then we went to Egypt. And after 2 weeks, I have to tell you, I told John, I said, John, I think we just need to concentrate on Iraq. I don't know how we're going to do anymore. And he says, well, let's go. And so we go to Egypt. And we went to 2 places. First place is a place called Minia in Upper Egypt, which is south, because the Nile River flows north. So Upper Egypt is upriver, down south. Minia is an area where there's been a lot of historic Christianity, but there's also been the Muslim Brotherhood and a lot of radical Islam. And so it's a very mixed area. And that's where we minister to churches and families. And that's our team that ministers in Minia. And we were there to minister in churches. You see me preaching in a church there, and it's a blessing to do. I stayed in the home of Honey right there, and his wife, Nala, and they were amazing, top middle. That's their worship team at one of the churches I spoke at. They have church 6 days a week, by the way, and they do that because they want to be together as often as they can, because they're a minority and they're treated like a minority, and so they come together to worship a lot. And you see worship going on. We're singing. I wish I could show you videos of that. We're in church. You see a pastor's family there. They wanted to have us over for lunch, and they shared a wonderful lunch with us. Ministry in the churches are growing. It's amazing. These are all the children of our Egypt sponsorship program, and our Egypt sponsorship program is unique in that in Minia, all of these kids, every one of these kids is fatherless. Every one of these kids, their fathers have died or were martyred, and they're being raised by widows. And these widows are some of the most destitute people in the country. So what we do is we choose widows' families to sponsor their kids. We support the widow's family through that. And then as the child gets close to aging out of the program, we put them in job training. We've trained barbers. We're training welders. And we also encourage them to do well in their studies. In fact, I could show you, I think I've got a picture in here of one of our kids, the one right in the middle. He did so well on his exams, he's going to law school. Wow. And you know, you see these things. We had a day where we pulled all the kids together. That's how we got the picture. But we gave out their backpacks for school, or we gave them their clothes, and we had the food to go to their families for that month. And this is all run by Egyptian believers, churches that we partner with, small churches, and pastors said, we want to be a part of this. And so it's not making the Americans the big deal. It's making the churches there the big deal. And what a day this was. It was just so amazing. Then we went from there. We drove through, along the Nile, up all the way to Alexandria on the coast. We put on a pastor's conference, and this is most of the pastors who came. We do this every year, but last year we couldn't because of COVID. These pastors minister 5 and 6 days a week, without break, without vacations. This was, for many of them, their first time getting away from their church in 2 years. Their first time being with their brothers in ministry in 2 years. And we put on a conference where we teach, and we offer training, and we offer encouragement. And we do 3 sessions in the morning, then we give them a whole afternoon just to rest and relax and spend time with each other. And then we come together for worship, and John would preach in the evenings, and it was amazing. We brought our team from Iraq. So our Iraqi pastors got to come, and one of them from Baghdad was actually one of our speakers. So this isn't just an Egypt conference anymore. It's now turning into a Middle East conference. But we had 70 pastors come, largest conference we've ever done there. And we just had an incredible thing. You see over there, there's a book in Arabic. We did the subject of the Trinity, and we thought, man, this is a tough thing in Muslim cultures because they just are really upset that they think we worship 3 gods. And Christians tend to avoid the subject of the Trinity because they don't want to have to talk about it. So we said, we're going to talk about the Trinity, and we're going to talk about the impact of knowing the Trinity in your life and ministry. And it was incredible. And a pastor friend of mine, when he heard we were doing this, he said, I went to Dallas Seminary with a guy who's over there in Jordan, and he's the president of a seminary over there, and his life's work has been working on studying the Trinity. He's written this amazing book, and we found it. It's that book is called God With Us and Without Us. It's about this thick. And he said, what if our church paid for those books? How'd you feel about giving those to the pastors? So they gave us a gift, contacted the author in Jordan. He sent the book to Lebanon where it was printed and then shipped to Cairo, Egypt, so we could get it. And we gave every one of those pastors a copy of that book. And it's one of the best. It's the best resource in Arabic on the subject of the Trinity. It's in their hands now. And those who support us have made that happen. But again, I can't help but think of people like Alicia, the boy in the center, 21 years old. He's a graduate of one of our programs and now has taken job training, but now has asked if he could come to work with our ministry. So he is now helping in all the distributions and all the work that is going on. It is just absolutely amazing to be a part of this. Let me just tell you, next steps by prayer. That government official I told you about is from the province of Halabja. That's the province that back in the 1990s, Saddam Hussein dropped mustard gas on one of his own provinces, his own people, because he thought they were too friendly with the Iranians who they were at war with at that time. The province has never recovered. This man I told you about is from there. And he wants us, he says, would you please plant a church in Halabja? He says, you plant a church in Halabja and in a year, everyone will be Christian. Now that may be an overly optimistic idea, but this is from a Muslim government official. And so now it's like, okay, we've been invited. We've got a wide open door. How do we go through it? Would you pray with us about that? We need to find the church planter, we need to find the place, and we need the resources to be able to support them. Our child sponsorship program, we've been asked if we would bring it into the city of Alexandria and also into Cairo, where most of you know there are dump cities in Cairo. There's lots of need that's there. And we've got churches that say, we want to do the same thing and multiply churches there. One of the most exciting things I've been asked to do is task the multi-site expansion of our Bible college. I didn't even talk about that because I didn't do that in this last trip. But Grace Bible College in India has grown from about 10 students to about 80 and a whole lot more online. COVID taught us how to do it online. And now we're saying we want to use online, we want to use extension sites, and we want to move into all sorts of different languages. We've offered our instruction in English, which is a national language in India. But you have to have had a pretty good education in it to be able to study in it, and not everybody has. So, we decided we want to be able to offer instruction not just in English, but in Marathi, which is the language of the state that we're in. We're in Maharashtra state. And in Hindi, and in Telugu, and any other language that may be needed and where we've got opportunities. A third of our students are from tribal areas, the unreached areas of India, and we want to help them establish this kind of training in their areas as well. So, I mean, this is all in front of us, and that's part of my job, so it's like, this is big, this is hard, pray. But here's the cool thing. We're about to be granted accreditation by the Asian Theological Association. That means we'll be able to offer accredited degrees, not just in India, but throughout Asia. And you know what we need in Iraq right now? Bible training, where they can take a 3-year program and get a credential that the government would recognize. And guess where we're going to do it from? Grace Bible College in India. What incredible opportunities. We have 100 children right now that we've signed up in the places we already are that need sponsors at $39 a month. And we're praying God would bring those in. Now, I didn't come with a display. I didn't come with a bunch of literature. I'm a rookie missionary. I should have done all of those things. But the nice thing is we've got everything online. And if you've got a computer or a phone and you go to indigenousministries.org, you can learn about all of our ministries. There's even, if you hit the button that says donate, you can choose child sponsorship, you can choose a missionary, there are any of these projects that are listed, you can say, I want to support that, or I can even just select where needed most. But all of that's available to you, and these are things that right now are pressing on our hearts. Pray for us as we go back to Iraq in November, because our principal from Amrauti is flying from India to Iraq to meet with us so that we can plan how we're going to make this educational expansion happen. Taking too much time, but hey, it's great to be with you, and thank you so much for your patience.